So hello, a month is short and welcome to the last show in 2014. And yeah, lots of questions and really busy November. So spent time on, I think, several conferences. So the WJAX was nice and great. So it was huge interest actually in JavaFX. At WJAX, I was in AuraDev and talk about Java EE and Pico services or Nano services, and then DevOps one step further about Pico services. And now let's go to the questions. So let's start with the first one, and somehow microservice related. So what would be your take on how to most elegantly deal with resilience and service discovery for Java 7 microservices? And I usually in my projects, I would never ask the question directly, because I would answer this with a counter question, why you would like to know this, right? Because usually there is almost no distribution in Java EE system, everything sticks in on war. But what I think what Nico means is the following. There is something called reactive manifesto. And there is something called resilient, and what it actually means is that if one application breaks, it doesn't affect the other applications, and you have to deal with exceptions somehow. And I think this is what is meant in the question. And how I deal with this, the funny story is the block you see here. If the statistic app here, which is called X-ray, fails or is too slow, you won't recognize anything on the block because they are isolated. So what I did actually, I think it was 5 years ago or something, I implemented microservices without knowing the term, which is always funny. And how it works is really simple. So there are actually two timeouts, connection timeout and read timeout on HTTP level. And if the timeout occurs, you will see a default stats, which is basically a minus sign. So there will be no stats at all. So it's pretty simple, fairly simple in this case. The problem is, in a usual enterprise project, is not that simple anymore. So think about, let's say, an ordering system. And you can input the order, you can process your shopping cart, but your order processing does not work anymore. The question is how to recover from this, right? Is it acceptable to take the order, but you cannot actually order? Or another, if you have insurance system, but you actually cannot store the insurance itself. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and I would say microservices are all about business logic, talking with the business experts what is acceptable and what isn't. So on that note, what I'm doing right now is in a project. So the wars communicate with JAX-RS, and you can set up with JAX-RS proprietary features for Jersey or REST Easy. You can set up something like timeout and read timeout, connection timeout and read timeout again. So you will know when the exception happened. So actually, Java EE was always resilient, so we always got lots of exceptions. But in usual Java EE application, 90% of the exceptions are just ignored. So there's actually no sensible exception handling in place. So so this about resilience. So again, if you talk to HTTP client, you have to deal with the problem that the client is too slow or does not exist. And on the client side, you have to do something about this. And of course, in theory, you can do a lot. Imagine you can talk, to a member of, you can talk to several databases. So if one database fails, you can talk to other database. But usually in enterprise projects, something like this is not acceptable, right? So you cannot just use like RAID for databases. In NoSQL databases, it already happens behind the scenes. So you can talk to whatever Cassandra node you like, for instance, and it will distribute the data automatically. I hope it's clear. And service discovery is a little bit more interesting. So probably what is meant by this is you have multiple servers, and these you would like to discover where the service actually lives. And there are what I did once. It was actually that simple, and it was back then. I didn't call this microservice. I called the idea shared nothing architecture. But you know, whatever we do, it's getting renamed all over again. So where's my pen does not work. Does this work? So this does. Okay. So what I had was the following. So I have some applications, wars, and these applications stored their services to a cache, and the cache was distributed. Back then it was EGBees, now it could be hazelcast, whatever you like. So if you put something here, the service gets replicated all over the place, and what you get from this is the following. Whenever the client connects, it always see, you know, the same amount of data. So what we actually implemented was a service registry in a hash map, or hash map multi-map actually. This was something like IP address and number of services. We could reorder the services, and the client could connect via HTTP to whatever service the client liked, and got always the same answer. And with this, we could even deactivate one node by disabling the service from the central registry. So this is also what Genie did back then. So it was, I think, the first microservice, Java Intelligent Network Infrastructure. So something like Discover, like with another indirection, which is replicated, and I would use, for instance, right now the JCache for this, and Hazelcast, for instance. So what you could do, implement a slow timer here, which registers all interesting services to the cache. The cache uses probably UDP or whatever you configured to replicate the data, and the client just goes to the cache and fetches the data. This is what we did several times. It works surprisingly well. Equally well, you can implement something like this with JAX-RS. But the question again is, do you really like this flexibility? This was a specific case a few years ago, and I would say in a usual project, I would never think about such a thing, because it just makes this stuff more complicated. Also, there is a, how it's called, fallacy of distributed computing by James Gosling. And one point from this is partial failure. The problem you have to deal with such a system is what happens if, you know, some nodes fails. You always have to think about the failure. And the question is it better? Isn't it better in most systems that they completely fail, or is it better that they partially fail? And this cannot be answered by us developers. It could be only answered by the business department actually. So okay, I hope it is clear right now. And see whether there are any questions. No questions, no Twitter questions, which is always great sign. So I think this question is covered. So the next one, OData versus raw JSON. What is OData? This is a standard based on Atom Publishing OData implemented by Microsoft. Yeah, or suggested by Microsoft, which interesting. I think this link, it even works. There is, I'll show you, I think in getting started, there is something like this. And what it actually does is standardize somehow how to query and filter with JSON. And there are some complicated examples like here, get service route airports as a parameter, KSFO and name. So, and what will search this, it would use this as parameter and search for the name attribute. So what I don't like is, you know, this how it looks like. So I would, you know, I would write it lowercase and I wouldn't use the parameter. But I would say it is at least standardized, and clearly standardized is not that hard to get. And if you look at the URI, it clearly states what it actually is. So it wouldn't be my first choice. I would look instead on Atom Publishing Protocol. Let's see whether we find this is actually protocol. This is this. What I look first, the I think this one, or this is even this one. I will just paste it to chat. I would use this one before OData. But the question is, you know, I will just pass it to chat. why the question? Do you have to use the OData, or is just, you know, you think it's something like a best practice? Best practice, I would look at Atom Publishing Protocol to get some ideas. But if you have to use OData, it looks actually nice. So this is my personal opinion, and yeah, this is a very subjective one. So take it with care. Nice statement from Twitter. Someone migrates to Java EE and would like to get rid of all libraries, and the only one which remained is this one, which is very good sign. So as you probably know, wars should be empty and just contain business logic. Simple log4j. I actually never used that in Java EE. So what I usually longer topic. We actually spent, I would say, 1 hour on the regular AirHacks in Airport Munich, by the way, in 2 weeks. And talking about logging, and my first statement is, and it actually shocks some developers, in some project I just say, I don't log anything. And the situation escalates, and then we think about how we would like to log. But if there are no additional requirements, and I would like to keep some statements in the log file, I will go with Java util logging straight. And either you can inject it with @inject in Java EE, or you could even wrap it with a simple adapter. Or what you can also do, you could use with lambdas, you can even expose functions or methods handles and inject them, which is also interesting, as for instance, consumer of strings. But this goes a little bit too far. The question is, I would use Java util logging first. If it is not good enough, my second choice would be log4j2. So not the first one, but the second one. And but the question is why? If it is too slow, isn't it probably better to use UDP or something for logging, or doesn't have to be file? And what I also always ask the question, isn't it better to write to a database? Because database has a nicer search facility. Okay, we think we covered this one. And questions? No questions in chat, no questions in Twitter. Perfect. Nice one. How to transform one-to-many relationships using JAX-RS. And the question is, this is just recurring questions. We have a complex graph of entities and you would like to expose them via JSON. So because it states, Magli states JAX-RS, the first question I will ask myself, is it eager or lazy? If it is eager, everything would be included in the JSON. But if it's lazy, you will have to expose a link. This would be the first idea, and I will try to serialize the link from JAX-RS first. But if someone decides to use eager loading, then let's say whether if I find it, and I'm being JSON, what I did, collector, I think. Let's see. So what I would do probably, I will experiment with collector. So I created here a collector which automatically converts registrations to array, for instance. And you could create, I will play with grouping collectors or whatever, because with Java 8, it is relatively simple. I would pass it to chat, or relatively simple. Yeah, it is simple actually to extract whatever you like from your object graph, from your domain objects, and create JSON objects on the fly. I would either experiment with collection stream and map, or use own collectors and try this. And this is what I would do. And if you have a lot of such cases, probably you could create DTOs object on the fly from the entity manager, implement a view in the database or whatever to condense your data. But this would be my choices. What I wouldn't do, implement DTOs just for the sake of eager loading, because sometimes architects choose to use DTOs and expect developers, to invoke all the getters, and you get eager loading for free. But you can also get eager loading for free if you say eager. So you don't have to implement thousands of DTOs to get eager loading. Okay, I hope it is clear. There's no magic solution for this except Java 8 and collectors. You can experiment with this and make a little bit nicer with this. What it does, it creates automatically the JSON object. Okay, I think next next question. So this is also, this strikes me. For me, this is really, I get a question over and over again. So there is a ECB pattern, entity control boundary, and the question is, there is a boundary and there is control, and when to use what. And so you said that you do it with refactoring when boundary gets too big. Could you please provide any pointers? Yes, one pointer is sonar. And if the boundaries, I don't know, cyclomatic complexity exceeds 5 or 7, it means you have if, else, then I would introduce a control, a very clear statement, I would say. And why you have to start with boundary first? Because you don't even know how to divide the logic if you don't have any. So start with the boundary, implement whatever you like in the boundary, which happens to be an EGB. And if you have something to extract, just move it out to a control. And how to do this? I would say this is like what we did in object-oriented programming. It's just decomposition. You have a concept in the boundary, and then you can put it to controls. For instance, right now I have to serve contents from wars. So external wars. Don't ask me why, but I'm implementing this. So what I started with the boundary first. It did everything, and then I have two controls. One cares about, I think, extraction of the URIs. The other one cares about finding the wars and providing the stream and extracting, the items from the war. And the other one connects the stream from the servlet with a stream from the war. And so I got the controls afterwards. Okay, this is actually the idea. So the wars, the controls came afterwards. It's not like I started with all the controls, because at the beginning I had no idea with what I will end with. Okay, I hope it is clear. It is if in a project you will see a bloated boundary. It will have, I don't know, a few hundred lines of code. So you should ask yourself, what is the name of the boundary, and then does really everything in the boundary fits, how it's called, fits the name. So is the name of the boundary still okay if you consider the contents? If not, probably the boundary does not have a single responsibility rather than multiple responsibilities, and then you can extract your stuff in the controls. So nice. I have a feeling I have to redeploy my application all the time during the development. It's not only a feeling, I also have to do this lots of time. So as I use NetBeans, I save it and it just deploys behind the scenes. So how to speed up development, and funny story. So how to speed up development using microservice. Yeah, what microservice is about is having a small war. If the war is small, the deployment is crazy fast. The larger the war, the slower the deployment. And I think we have later a question. There was 1,000 EGBees, and someone would deploy 1,000 EGBees, and it takes 10 minutes or something to deploy. So recently we converted one ear with multiple jars inside to one war, and the deployment time was significantly faster. I actually forgot what the factor was, but it is really worth to do this. So if you have an ear, just convert it to a war, and you can speed up a lot of time. So a lot of deployment time. And I actually, but on the other hand, if it is too slow, just buy JRebel. It is too slow for you. I will just buy it, because I don't know, it does cost a couple hundred of dollars or euros, I think. But if you are more productive with this, it will pay out soon. So this is a great tool for me. With my strategy, keep war skinny. Just stock Maven and NetBeans is just fast enough. So I never have to wait longer than, I would say, I don't know, 20 seconds at most. Okay, let's see. Any questions? So where is my... No questions here. And no questions here. Cool. Cool. Then the next one. So what is, this is also a nice topic, and I think 2 hours from Airhacks. So we discuss really, there are already heating discussions, because if you start with this discussion, the next discussion would be, should the object and parameters should be a type safe or not. But if we start with this, it will be significantly longer than 1 hour. So what is, in your opinion, the preferred way to handle service versioning for services? I would say two ways. Either use the entry point, use the URI. The URI is the version number. So it's you have hello war /v1 for the version. Then I would use semantic versioning /resource name. This will be the first one. The problem with this is if you change the URI, you will effectively have to redeploy all your clients. So, but still, in enterprise environment or in controlled environment, it could be the simplest possible solution. Why this? Because you will probably have to deploy the clients on the server at the same time. So, which is actually great. So you will break the clients, but if they have to be redeployed anyway, this is actually even better. In internet environment, you cannot do this. So in internet, I would just go with the standard like hello /resources with not version at all. And then I will ensure the backward compatibility, not with versioning, rather with tests. So I would try to keep all the services as backward compatible as only possible with automated builds, and probably something like a matrix build on Jenkins. So we are running, next question. We are running a Java EE application with thousands of EGBees, and it takes 10 minutes for server to start up. This is actually remarkable. So this is what it actually means. If you would have hundreds of EGBees, let's say, it would take 1 minute to start, which is also my experience. But usually in an ECB architecture, if you have, let's say, 10 components, you will have in best case 10 EGBees. And if you have, in worst case, I would say about 20. Because some controllers would be asynchronous, you will have to implement an asynchronous annotation, or you would like to have, you know, a singleton EGB startup singleton or something like this. But thousands of EGBs looks like operating system to me. So I would rather, in this particular case, think about what can be simplified. And I'm pretty sure in this particular case, you could delete, I don't know, 50% of the source code without affecting the business logic usually. Because thousands of EGBs is really hard to believe what happens behind the scenes. It looks like, I don't know, an operating system. So make wars smaller, convert the ear to, oh, there's even ear, you see, with 3 different projects referred. So I would convert the ears to wars, and then I will probably take, I don't know, 6 minutes. And then make the convert some EGBs to POJOs if it's really the issue, because what EGBs actually are POJOs with aspects. So if you don't need the aspects, just use POJOs. But actually, in my project, I never had a problem with EGBs. If the deployment was slow, usually the problem was the persistence and creation of prepared statements, stuff like this. EGBs were not the issue. What can also be class path scanning. So if you have CDI or something, you know, all the class paths has to be scanned. What you can do, you can restrict that. You can say scan only this. In Java 6, you will have to use proprietary features of weld. In Java 7, it is even standardized. So what is the most efficient way to communicate between 2 microservices, especially when one is deployed as different wars and 2 on different Docker images on the same host machine? Actually, this is what we already stated. And on my server, I have about 8 such wars and 8 Docker images, and they communicate like they communicate. It doesn't make any difference for me whether it runs within Docker or not. I use hazelcast for the communication. So what you could do, you can, it depends on your configuration. You could expose the UDP port or something. But I mean, this is just usual, you know, business as usual. There's nothing special with it. So this question sounds interesting, but the you know, the execution is fairly simple. So what you can do, you can just You can just deploy your wars to a Docker, and then you can communicate. And of course, you will have to either link the containers or use Hazelcast for discovery, because usually Docker images are isolated, so we'll have to link them. Or there is a pattern, I think it's called ambassador pattern in Docker. So I will look at this. So what do you do for simple reporting in enterprise projects? So we used Jasper reports or BERT in the past. In one project I used this with a little bit more than just simple reporting. It was called Pentaho. Let's see, is it still alive? Pentaho Cattle. Yeah, looks nice. So exactly. So it was Eclipse IDE, and what you could do, you could it looks somehow commercial, but it was open source, and yeah, hopefully it's still open source. This is what I used a long time ago, BERT and Jasper reports more recently. And usually for simple business intelligence, you don't need anything. So build, a single page app with Angular, and you are ready to go. If you need more fancy charts, then use how it's called 3DS, data-driven documents from a JavaScript framework. And if you are allowed to deploy Java on the clients, I will always use JavaFX, because with the charting and data binding, it is extremely productive. Okay, let's see. Are there any questions? No questions here. No questions here. And no questions in chat. Everything crystal clear. So, I think question answered. So what are the possible solutions for API gateway in Java environments, specifically when there is a different Java app per business line exposing REST APIs? So I don't think this is the gateway pattern from my book. What is meant here, I think, as table something like REST facade. So what you can always do, you can implement a war which exposes stable API to outside world, and connects to all the backend services, and you can call it gateway. So it's actually an old trick. We did it in Corba, RMI, and now you can do it with REST. Nothing special with it. It works well in case the REST APIs don't change a lot. Of course, if something disappears in the backend services, it cannot be compensated in the front end. But this is what I would do. And possible solutions, just implement. This is really fairly simple. In one workshop, someone asked me, what to do. Should we introduce ESB or something? It's like, what you should first do, implement a very simple prototype with Java EE. And I got the answer. It was actually great advice. It was a lot simpler than I actually thought. And they implement everything with a Vue POJOs instead of using a huge ESB. So I got here a question from Twitter. Let's see. Question 9. Question 9. Oh, latency. I didn't measure anything on my Linux box. I use standard hazelcast, and it was crazy fast. If latency is issued, there was a recent messaging solution. I forgot actually the name, which was crazy. So what they use on TCP IP level, you can send messages, and this was low latency and several thousand messages per second. It was definitely not Kafka, but it was something similar. But interesting point. I usually don't have such a problems usually, so the performance is just fine. And what happens in projects, usually the people are really surprised how fast Java EE is, and they assume this is too slow, and they search for workarounds before they even have a problem. So I didn't measure specific protocols, but I use Hazelcast, straight HTTP, and this is crazy fast. So latency a few milliseconds. So and this was fine enough for me. And if you know specific solutions, I would just, you are to do more. But with a few milliseconds, you get JAX-RS, and hazelcast is even faster. And what there's also an interesting project on GitHub. You can use JMS, which is mapped to hazelcast. So so you can actually send messages which are distributed with hazelcast. Okay. So tools provided by vendors are centralized solution to APIs. I don't believe in such tools. I have to admit. Usually what I saw in such a tools usually pay off only if you have to access proprietary backends and they come with adapters, so you can just reuse the adapters. But usually if you just in a project, you can implement with straight Java 6 and 7 very efficiently the combination of all the backend services. By the way, what I will do this week, I'm giving a talk at Java User Group Gdańsk or Danzig, and I delivered several talks about microservices, but they were very esoteric, I would say. Yeah, what I will try in Danzig, to implement more of the stuff, just no slides and just hacking all the time, and using Java 8 and Java 7 and implement some timeout coordination of between words and stuff like this. I will do it actually the first time because it seems like there are some interest on microservices. So if you like, come to Gdańsk or Danzig and see you there. Okay. Yeah, this is also my opinion. Nobody understood them. Yeah, probably they were easy to understand, but hard to use, I would say. They generate lots of code, or the idea that they coordinate something, and there is some terrible stuff like I forgot. You had to to implement the logic between in the scriptlets without any possibility for tests. So be careful with such tools, and implement a proof of concept first, and then look at the tool. So if you think you are not productive enough, then look for a tool, and then compare the productivity. So I get again a question from Twitter. Yeah, this is what also I meant. So you have a gateway API, and this gateway API provides us more stable more stable access to the backend services. I would only do this if you have multiple teams and they cannot be easily coordinated. So one team just cares about the API and keeps the API stable. If something does not work, they try to talk with the backend guys about the problems. Okay, we have this. Would you use collectors over Jackson to create manipulate JSON? Hastings asked me, would you use collectors over Jackson at the C to create manipulate JSON? Yes, and the answer is, you have Jackson, we have Jettison. You could use how it's called JSON from Google. So if possible, I would stick with the standard and use collectors if they are easy to use, if they really fit your case. But if the Jackson is orders of magnitude, easier to use than collectors, then I would have to rethink my answer. But this would be my general case. I would go with straight collectors in Java 8 before I use something proprietary from Jackson. This is true. Having that said, in almost all my projects, I'm using Jackson behind the scenes without, affecting the code. But this is what I usually switch from Jettison to Jackson, and the reasons are obvious. Like, the single slotted array is always the problem. Very good. This is a very interesting question. Simple one, but interesting. And the question is, what is better, serializing enums with the ordinal or strings via JSON? Usually, the question I get asked for JPA: what is better, storing the index in the database or the value of the enum? So then the name, the string actually. Would you like to store the red as a red, or here 0 and here 1? This is the question. Everything has, of course, pros and cons in the database. If rename it and don't change the order. The ordering is, of course, easier to get. If you the problem is if the name changes, you have problem in the database. Via JSON, I would prefer the names over orders, or over ordinals or index numbers. And the reason is, if you get a JSON object and look at this, you know what comes over the ear. If you get the index, you will have to resolve it somehow. But if you have lots of such a stuff and you have something like, lookup service, the question is, but this is a workaround, I would go with strings first. If you have lots of enums and you have to resolve them somehow, then I would think about workarounds. But I will use the names in JAX-RS. Oh, sometimes you are talking about your personal server. So, and actually I prepared some images, but I stored it in a folder. I will, at the end of the show, I will show you the pictures from the server and probably try to find, the details. So this is a funny question. It is true, I built the servers starting in, I think the first one was 1999, and the next serious one was a 2 CPU 550 megahertz Xeon, and then they got better and better, and the current one is the best one, I would say, and it's very low power, 80 watts, and it takes the least amount of energy, is the fastest one, and really runs like hell. So nice machine. I will show it later because it's a little bit Christmas edition, we could cover such a stuff. But thank you for the questions, really nice. So most of my JavaFX applications have composite views, and so the subviews have to communicate with each other. I hate nesting controllers using fxml injection. I never did that actually, or I misunderstood the question. I think it creates a strong coupling between the views. Usually, I would say, I don't care about coupling. It's always the question, what happens if you have decoupling? How likely is it that a view changes? But still, probably right. I use AfterburnerFX. This is really great. So AfterburnerFX, a project created by me on a weekend, and now it gets larger and larger. By the way, there are hot news, Afterburner news. I was a little bit sad because I got a lot of community contributions with really cool stuff with Afterburner. So I got, support for qualifiers, scopes, and stuff like this, and I rejected everything because I couldn't see a clear use case. So great code, but no use case. So I rejected all the contributions. What I found a solution actually. So what I did, there is a branch called Top Gun, not only a branch. In the Top Gun version of Afterburner, all the recent contributions I accepted and migrated to the branch, and you will find in Maven Central actually 2 artifacts, the Afterburner Straight and Afterburner Top Gun. And in the Top Gun you get even scopes from Weld and all the stuff contributed by the community. So the point being, if you have any injection with Afterburner and you provide some tests and it is well tested and clean code and if possible, no external dependencies, I will accept as much as only possible. I will never ever ask you the question, what is actually the use case for this? And it will go to the Top Gun branch, and everything else, the core Afterburner will still stay lean. So this is actually the idea. So back to you, what is the best way? I still don't know because I still investigated, but what I did, I think 2 years ago, is the following. So I had such a problem in LightView, which is a sub-project of Lightfish. It is monitoring for Java EE and for Java EE applications. And we have here the presentation dashboard. And let's see our applications EGBees. Let's see whether it is what I think it is. So these are the EGBees, and I have a method. Yes, exactly. There's a table of the methods, and there are some pool statistics, I think. Yeah, with a chart. So this actually, we have EGB, which is top level, view and presenter, and it contains methods and pools. And what happens here is the top level presenter actually instantiates, you see here, pool view, several pool views, and uses the, just extracts the presenters and does something with it. So the method view does not know the EGB view and doesn't know the pool view, but the top level presenter knows about methods and pools. And I think this coupling is okay because the top level EGB presenter is responsible for providing monitoring data for EGBees, and so it is absolutely okay to instantiate multiple pool and methods presenters. So this is how I deal with this situation, and I don't think the methods presenter knows the pool presenter. Doesn't have to, because it is actually the already happens in the top level presenter. Look at the code. This is very old code. This is one of the first applications. No, not the first. It is the I just migrated parts of Lightfish to Afterburner because I wanted to delete some code, and yeah, and this worked really well. Okay, question on Twitter. Yeah, always do the TechBeer answers via Twitter. Proof of concept and compare with commercial solution, and you get, you know, some numbers to see whether your idea would actually work or not. Okay. And now I've the next very interesting question from Carsten, and the question is. So it seems like there is a graph of entity objects, and the entity objects, they have inheritance and stuff like this, but they would like to, depending on the user, there should be so something like a filter, Hibernate filters. So depending on the user, Carsten would show more or less, or display more or less instances of the EGBees. So what means the entities need to access the principal. And the question is how to do this. And the answer is first, not possible with Java EE without any hex. And this was actually my idea for Java EE 7 to provide entity manager injection for entities. And this what you would need here is service injection for entities. And this was rejected because they say, okay, there are some workarounds. It is actually not clean, and the lifecycle is different, and everything is clear. That is that this is not a very clean solution, but I still use it or need it in my projects. So what I always did, I tried to store the entity manager, and Carsten should store also the principal, either in thread local or in transaction synchronization registry. Transaction synchronization registry, and the entities could access this by using a static utility. So I provide static utility methods like em for entity manager or principal for principal. And usually within the static methods, what happens there, either you access the thread local to get your context, or you can access your thread synchronization session. How it's called? Session synchronization, transaction synchronization registry, so TSR. You can access this with a JNDI, and I call it in the green book. Where is the book? Context holder. Let's see whether I have an bean context holder. Yeah, transaction synchronization registry. 5 years old, man. Almost 6. So this is the one, and rec HSR uses Afterburner. So a question to rec HSR in the chat: what are you building with the Afterburner, if you can say it? So if you have some project with Afterburner, drop me a tweet or chat message. I'm really interested what people are building with this. So so this was the context holder, the first one. And let's see in this article. Now there's, in the book I use also the EM, but you know what I mean. You can store the thread local, your context in the thread local. It could be principal, so you have to inject it somewhere, for instance in interceptors or filters or whatever. and then store it in the thread local, and the entity beans are going to be injected in the same thread. The thread local is a little bit problematic because you have really to reliably clean up the thread local, otherwise you will end up having memo leaks. Or transaction synchronization registry is even better because the entities are going to be executed the same transaction as something, putting the principal to the transaction synchronization registry. What transaction synchronization registry is like a thread local within transaction. So you basically get a hash map. You can store whatever you like, and in the whole transaction you can access your stuff. So your principal, and then according to the principal name, you can filter your results. Okay, perfect. Questions here? No. No questions. Oh, question von Kroxic, probably. Have you ever seen success in enterprise environment that required all services to speak a single generic global messaging model? I think this is what I mentioned earlier, the discovery mechanism. So all wars wrote some data to a hash map. It was distributed by hazelcast. Back then by EHcache, right now it would be Jcache and probably hazelcast. So yes, we implemented this. But, and of course in enterprise environment, of course, because usually in an enterprise environment, you have legacy boxes like ZOS or AS400 machines, and they usually expose the triggers, stored procedures, whatever they have, RPG and PL1 triggers via MQ series queues, and you have to access the queue somehow, and usually then everyone uses MQ series, so it's forced to use MQ series. This is very common in enterprise space. The larger the company, then the more common it is. And MQ series is actually not that bad, so you can configure the queues, the remoting differently. So I hope I answered your question. So I saw it a lot, but it was clear necessity. So there was not like, best practice, let's do it. I would never do it just for fun, like, introduce JMS because of decoupling or whatever. It's just, I don't believe in this. Okay, so I think we covered all questions, which is remarkable. Still under 1 hour, 16 questions. So I was really fast without knowing it. And now I will just switch to full screen, and I will try to find my server and the matrix. So if you, so this is actually the power supply. This is the Corsair DDR. What I did so many pictures, if there is some problems, I can just buy, the parts. And there's the Intel Xeon. It is the motherboard, and the sockets. And this is the empty chassis. And the cool stuff is, it is actually the most the most expensive part is the chassis. It was designed by BMW USA. And you see it was in 2012, so it is actually in 2013 it went online, and the parts were there were Western Digital hard disk, but it isn't true anymore. They are Samsung 840 SSDs and NMX 80 plus efficiency grade power supply, and this CPU Xeon quad core does not exist anymore on the market, and Thermaltake GT full tower, and Corsair 8 gig. So they have either 24 gigabyte or I think it's either triple channel or quad channel. I think triple channel. They have 24 gigabyte of RAM, and it was very cheap. So the whole machine was, I think, 2K or something at most. Okay, this is actually my server. It doesn't mean anything anymore because it is already 3 years old machine, so now it's probably costs, I don't know, 500 euros or whatever. So this was the actually Christmas Christmas question. So I hope there are no more questions here. Everything is answered. Okay, no questions here. No questions here. So I wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and probably see you in 2 weeks, 1.5 weeks, we have the whole week in Munich again. Still seats available. So we have about 25 to 35 attendees. So there is still room. If you like, just register today or tomorrow and see you there. And in January, we have one session about Java 7, Java 8. So with all the crazy stuff, what you can do with Java 7, Java 8. And one session about testing and code quality, you know, how to build, you know, when the boundary is too big. Such question get answered. And of course, one slot about microservices. So I couldn't stand the bus anymore. So, okay, what you can actually do, whatever we do with Java E are actually microservices. I will talk about resilience and whatever, reactive programming a bit, but with trying to minimize all the dependencies just with this. Okay, is there any question here? Merry Christmas. Perfect. So Merry Christmas also to you, and see you soon or in January. So there is already all these slots for next year are already actually set. So thank you for watching and bye.